So last time we did equations. This time we're going to do inequalities. And so the difference is instead of an equal sign, you're going to have an inequality sign. So greater than, less than, greater than, equal to, less than, equal to. We remember these? Okay. Do you remember the activity that we did that was above sea level or below sea level? Do you remember we did like thumbs up, thumbs down? We don't need to figure out what it actually is. Just is it positive or negative? So greater than means it needs to stay above sea level. Less than means it needs to stay below sea level is where we're headed here, okay? But it starts out the exact same way. Pretend this was an equal sign, what would you do? If it was an equals, how would you handle it? We would need to factor, so first, good, and what do I call that? Evacuate, minus over the 3, so you have it all on one side. The common mistake here, and I 100% get why this happens, is people will accidentally change it to an equal sign. 100% get why that happens. Try to not let that happen though, okay? All right, now we're gonna factor it. So draw your 2 sets of parentheses. 2x squared, that would be 2x, 1x, 3 is gonna be 1 and 3. What are the outsides given us? 2 times 3, 6, and then the inside's 1. So to get a positive 5, we would need positive 6 minus 1. Now here's how you handle these to see if it's above or below, is we make number lines. And you're going to do this in calculus if you go on to calculus next year as well. You're going to take 2x minus 1, make a number line. You're going to take x plus 3, make a number line. And we're going to decide where those equal 0, exactly the same way you did with equations. And then we'll put in our pluses and minuses for above or below. The first time I do this, you are going to look at me like, what on earth is going on? Kind of like you are already. Then after we do a couple more, you're going to be like, oh, okay, I've got it. Anything that's brand new to you, you need to just give it a second, all right? Where does this one equal 0? Positive 1/2. Okay, I'm going to put 1/2 on my number line. If you're like, why'd she put it over there? I'm going to explain that. Where would this one equal 0? -3. The reason I put them where I did is they have to go smallest to biggest, and negative numbers come before positive numbers. So do you see how left to right I made the negative one come before the positive one? Okay, now we're going to do these one at a time. So we're going to just look at the first one. Can you give me a number smaller than 1/2? Remember, give me a number that lives in this section. 0 is a very good choice. All right, we're going to plug in 0 to this right here and just, I don't care what it actually is, just if it's positive or negative. If you plug in 0 for x right here, 2 times 0 minus 1, negative. This section is negative. Can you give me a number bigger than 1/2? 1 is an excellent choice. All right, you can pick 0 and 1. That's what you want to do. If you plug in 1 for x right here, 2 times 1 minus 1. The positive, that section is going to be positive. Now we're going to do the same thing here. Can you give me a number smaller than -3? A number, bless you, -4. If you plug -4 in for x right here, -4 plus 3 is good, negative. Can you give me a number, bless you, bigger than -3? 0. If you can pick 0 or 1, pick that, okay? If you plug in 0, 0 plus 3, positive. And then what I do, I'm going to use a different color. It won't show up great, but I call these balloon strings. I draw in, like, it looks like little balloons, except there's a string coming out of the top as well. That would be weird if you had an actual balloon that did that. But anyway, I call them little balloon strings. We're splitting it up into our 3 separate sections. And you're figuring out now what the overall sign of the whole thing is. So look at the first section. Come with me on this. A negative times a negative is positive. Good. In the middle, a negative times a positive is negative. And then over here, a positive times a positive is positive. Negatives cancel and become positive. One year, I will never forget this. Someone said, don't positives cancel and become negative. No. Positive number times a positive number is a positive number. You all with me? Positive. Okay. Then you choose which sections are your answer. That involves looking back at the original problem. Like go back up to here. It says greater than 0. So do we want the positive sections or the negative sections if it's greater than? So we want this section and we want this section where the pluses are. We want the positives because it says greater than 0. So the way you would write this section is you would want negative infinity to -3, union, and then how would you write this section? 1/2, good, to infinity. Why did I use parentheses and not brackets? Good, it is not included. It doesn't have the equal to. Follow-up question. If it had been the other way around, don't write this down, I'm just doing a extension question. If it had said less than 0, what would our answer have been? Yeah, so -3 to 1/2. Do you see what I'm saying there? Okay, now to save you some time, do you see how when we did our number lines, they were negative until they got to the number and then turned positive? See how this is negative until it gets there and then turns positive? It will always be negative and then turn positive unless something weird happened. And if you're like, what does that mean? You'll know because you'll be like, hey, that was weird. Something weird will happen. I have examples on here like that, but if nothing weird happened, it's negative and then turns positive, just trying to save you some time. But you can always pick a test number. Now this one, you cannot factor as it is. I put this on here to review from last unit, your synthetic division. We're going to go to y equals and type this thing in. I want you to just watch. All right, 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 32x plus 48, zoom 6. We're looking for where it touches the x-axis, guys. Where does it touch the x-axis? I need one that's like a nice whole number. -4 is a good answer. Good. So we're going to put -4 in the little box. What should the remainder be? 0. You can think of this like midterm review. Okay. Is your countdown in order? Yes, we are good. So go ahead and do that, and you should get a 0 remainder. If you didn't, then you had a whoopsie somewhere. Do you see how it was cubed? So you have to get it down to a squared, and you need a calculator to get you started. So if it's bigger than squared, but typically I'm going to give them to you as squared. Did you get 2, -11, 12? Okay, so it's 2x squared minus 11x plus 12. And we're going to draw our 2 sets of parentheses and factor that. I wrote a little big. I still need to do the number lines. So I hope you wrote smaller than me. I wrote a little bit too big. All right, so that's going to split 2x and 1x. 12. You can do 2 times 6 or 3 times 4. We're going to have to guess and check. If we don't guess right, we'll just fix it. What do you want to try? Well, 6 times 3 would be 18. We're gonna do 3 and 4. All right, let's put the 3 here in the 4. I think that might be right. Okay, what do the outsides give you? 8. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 and 3 makes 11, but they need to be negative. So now we're gonna make our number lines. You're gonna get a number line for 2x minus 3. You're gonna get a number line for x minus 4. And I know, I'm sorry, I wrote a little bit too big. I was leading the party and I wrote a little bit too big. Now for -4, your factor would be x plus 4. Good. So remember how you always have the original one? Also, you can think of it this way. If it was to the 3rd power, you should have 3 of these. Now, let's think about where those would equal 0 before you start writing them on there, because you need to go smallest to biggest. What would this one give you if you made it equal 0? 3 halves, which is 1 1/2. Okay, this one would be 4, and this one would be -4. Okay, so -4 is the smallest. And then 3/2, and then +4. I feel like at a certain point, it looks like, does anyone play a musical instrument? You know, like the staff? That, like, I know that's 5 lines, but you know what I'm saying? Like, start drawing everything in. Now, did you just say that? Okay. Now, if nothing weird happened, nothing weird happened, did you see a weird negative somewhere or a squared or is anything backwards? No, nothing weird happened. So look, I'm just trying to save you some time. But you got to listen to me, guys. They're going to be negative until they get to whatever the number is and then turn positive. And you can pick numbers in each section to test. But again, I am just trying to save you some work. Okay, they will be negative and turn positive unless something weird happens. So negative until it gets to whatever the number is and then turn positive. And then you can draw in your little balloon strings. And again, unless something weird happened, they will alternate. Like it'll be every other one, plus, minus, plus, minus. So you kind of just need to see what it starts with. For the first section, a negative times a negative times a negative. You have 3 negatives. Good, negative. And then the second section, you have a negative times a negative, which would cancel. So positive. And then this section, positive, negative, positive, that would be negative. And then all positives would be positive. Believe it or not, that always goes really well. People don't have trouble with that. People have trouble with writing the answer. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and that always like confuses me because I feel like that's the hard part. That goes great. It's then writing the answer that's difficult for everybody. So pay attention. You have to go back to the original problem. What does this say? Less than or equal to 0. So do you want the positive sections or the negative sections? You want negatives. So that's this one and this one. And you want brackets on your numbers. Why is that? The line it's equal to, you're including them. Except for infinity, you can't bracket an infinity. Okay. So how would you write this first section? Until -4, good, bracket, union. And then this section, perfect. Now, look at number 3. I made it A, B, C, D. Do you see what I did there? Because I tried to make it a compare and contrast. Oh, wait, question. Go ahead. All the numbers are bracketed. You just can't bracket an infinity because infinity is not a number. So you can't ever put a bracket on an infinity or a negative infinity. But it's because it has the equal to that we want to include those numbers. So yeah, these are all 3 of these are brackets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, yes.
Why did we cross out what we crossed out? Like on the number line?
Oh, I'm shading in where the answers are. Like we want this section and we want this section. I'm coloring in where I want the sections that I want to keep. They're not crossed out. It's not crossed out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it did. Hold on a second. Let me pause. All right. Do you guys see what I did with number 3 there? I want you to look at it and understand where I'm headed, like why I gave this problem. Well, but yes, they all have a squared, but more than that, they're all what? Look at A, B, C, and D. They're all the exact same problem. But what's different about them? Okay, so I have one of each. I have a greater than, or equal to, a less than, or equal to. So we're only going to need to do the number line once, but we're going to get a different answer for each of them. So first thing we're going to do is factors. So go ahead and draw your 2 sets of parentheses. You guys make me nervous. All right, this would be x and x, and then what? Oh my gosh, do you notice how something weird happened?
Wow.
You're not going to miss it because you're going to be like, hey, that was weird. What's a little weird about that? What do I call those? It's a twin, which means you're going to write it as x plus 1 squared. So this is our number line. And you're going to be like, hey, there's a squared. That's weird. Sometimes you end up with it being backwards. It's like, hey, that's weird. Sometimes there's an extra negative sign. You'll be like, hey, that's weird. Like you'll notice if something strange happens. Now, where would that equal 0? If you set this equal to 0, -1, good. It doesn't matter what number you plug in. This part doesn't matter at all. If you square something, what sign is it going to be? It is positive all the time. You can put pluses the whole way across. It doesn't matter. If you square something, it's positive. Okay? So come with me on this. So that's why I did an ABCD so we can compare and contrast. Do you see how this says greater than 0? Where is it greater than 0? Everywhere except because it equals 0 at -1. And this does not have an equal to it. Do you see how it's above sea level everywhere except at that number? So how would we write that? Well, it would be -infinity to -1 with a parentheses. You want to leave it out. Union to infinity. Good. So it is positive everywhere except specifically at -1. And that's because it equals 0 there. Now we don't need to redo the number line because it's the same number line. Can you look at this one? Greater than or equal to 0. What do you think about that one? Good, because it's everywhere. You get to include the -1 got invited back to the party. He got left out of this one because we didn't have the equal to on it. This one we put the equal to, so he got brought back in. All right. This one says what? Less than 0. Where is this? Nowhere. Perfect. Well, that would be where it's negative. Where is it negative? Yeah, less than 0 means negative. We don't have any negatives, so nowhere. Well, I'm getting to that. Hey guys, what does this one say? Less than or equal to 0. Now it equals 0 specifically at -1. So you get only -1. So that's a party that only has -1 in it. He's in a party all by himself, which is a little sad, but it's the only answer that you got. Okay. We'll finish up this side of the paper and then we'll do our break. Now, these ones are fractions. The only thing you need to worry about with these ones is your troublemakers. Who is the troublemaker for this one? -1 is your troublemaker. Just hold on to that, okay? But otherwise, you're going to do it the exact same way. You're going to have a number line for your x - 3, a number line for your x + 1, and we're going to put our pluses and minuses in there. Nothing weird happened, so they'll be negative and then turn positive. If nothing strange happened, it's negative to positive. So where does this one equal 0? 3. And where does this one equal 0? Good. And -1 comes before 3. You just need to put them in order, smallest to biggest. Like that should be logical. All right, and then look, it's going to be negative and then turn positive. It'll be negative until it gets to whatever the number is, like wherever that change happens, and then it'll turn positive. And then you can put in your balloon strings. As a heads up, I'm going to color in the part I want to keep. It's just like this. It's a number line. You color in the part that you want to keep. What's our overall sign for the first section? Good. Why is it positive? Negatives cancel. And then this section, negative, and then this section, positive. So we're going to color in the ones we want. It comes back to the original problem. What does this symbol mean? Greater than. So we want positive sections. I'm coloring in the parts I want. This is the answer. I've never had that be an issue before, so that's why I wasn't expecting it. I usually know where the common misconceptions are going to be. That's never been one before, but I got you. If you want to circle it, you can do that instead. All right. So how would we write this first section? It would be -infinity to -1. Now let's have a bracket versus parenthesis conversation. You'd think it would be a bracket, but it's actually a parenthesis. And the reason why is, hold on. It's because -1 is, yeah, that's your troublemaker. That's where it's, you cannot leave that one in there. It has to get left out. Union, now how would you write this section? Bracket 3 to infinity. You, listen, let me clarify. You would want this -1 to have a bracket. The problem had an equal to, so it should be a bracket, but you can't have a 0 denominator. It's your troublemaker, so you have to leave it out. Okay, let's try one more. And then we'll do our break. You have to factor the numerator before you can do the problem. How is that going to split? Good. Oh my gosh. Hey, something weird happened. Isn't that weird? So we're going to write it as x plus 5 squared. And then how would the denominator split? Yep. X minus 2, x plus 2. We're going to have number lines for both of them. And then you're going to put where they equal 0. What's going to be the smallest one? Because you have to go smallest to biggest. -5, very good. And then, yeah, the x plus 2 gives you -2. And then +2. If nothing weird happened, it's negative and turns positive. So these two, nothing weird happened. They're going to be negative and good. Hold on, let me get everybody there. Those two were both negative and then turned positive. The first one is all positive because if you square something, it is positive all the time. All right, so what is the overall sign for the first section? You have positive, negative, okay, positive. Now look, do you see how right here it's still positive? It didn't alternate because of this first number line being all positive. Something weird happened, okay? How about the third section? Negative and then positive. Again, believe it or not, that usually goes okay. It's writing the answer that's a problem. You have to look back at this symbol. What does that mean? Less than or equal to. So we want the negative part. I'm coloring in the part that I want. So it would be -2 to +2. You would think brackets, but -2 and +2 were your troublemakers from the denominator, so it has to be parentheses. I get that that looks like an ordered pair, and that kind of bothers me too, but it is an interval from -2 to +2. All right, so for number 6, we're going to need to factor the numerator. So draw your 2 sets of parentheses. And then how would you split up 4? You can do 2 and 2 or 1 and 4.
1 and 4.
Good. Good. -1, -4. So you're going to have 3 number lines. You're going to have one for x minus 1, one for x minus 4, and one for -x plus 3. Hey, that's weird. Do you get what I was saying? You're not going to miss it because you're going to be like, hey, that was weird. Okay. So let's see. This one would be 1. This one would be 4. This one would be 3. So in order, it would go 1, 3, 4. So the first 2, how can I fill those in since those are like quote unquote normal? Yep. Yeah, negative until the number and then positive. And again, I'm just trying to save you some time there and work. Now this one we're going to actually test. So can you give me a number smaller than 3? 1 or 0 is a good choice. Or you want to do 0? If you plug in 0 for x right here, if you plug in 0 for this x, 0 plus 3, guys. But you can't negative a 0. No. Let's plug in 1 instead. You guys are killing me this morning. All right, if you plug in 1, negative 1 plus 3 is 2, and that's positive. Give me a number bigger than 3. I'm a little nervous. 4 or 5 or 7 million. It doesn't really matter. Let's say you plug in 4 though. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative. Do you see how it was opposite? It was positive and turned negative. Okay. So then you can draw in your little balloon strings. And then you're going to figure out the overall sign. So what's your overall sign for the first section? Negative, negative, positive. Positive. Negatives cancel. The second section, the negative. The third section, positive, negative, negative, positive, and then negative. Now we're going to figure out which sections we want. Which parts are your answer? It says less than 0. So the negative sections are the ones that we want. These are the ones you want. Now you don't have to worry so much about the brackets and parentheses in this one, because what are we just going to use for everything? They're all just going to be parentheses. So it's nice when that's the case. So how would you write this section? Perfect. Union. And then this one. Beautiful. Now this last one's the toughest one. That's why I saved it for last. You can't set up your number lines until you have 0 on one side. So you have to evacuate. This is going to get moved over here. So you're going to get 2 over x plus 1 minus 3 over x minus 5 greater than 0. You have to have 0 on one side. Now, the second thing that makes this problem tougher is you need to take the 2 fractions and put them together. That involves getting a common. Okay, so it's not hard, but it is tedious. And you're going to have to do a little bit of writing. They're going to get multiplied by each other. This one's going to get multiplied by the x minus 5. This one's going to get multiplied by the x plus 1. You're multiplying them by the other one. Okay. So if you distribute this 2, that's going to be good. And then this is tricky. You are not distributing a 3, but a negative 3 into there, which is negative 3x 3. Believe it or not, that actually usually goes well because people can distribute and people even usually remember the negative signs. That's good. And then they leave off the entire denominator. Like, just don't even write it at all. So try to remember that you still need the x plus 1 and the x minus 5. Like, just don't leave them behind. Because to be honest, that's the numerator is the hard part. And that usually goes well. People just like forget about the other half of the problem. Just try not to do that, okay? Now, when you go to make your number lines, you're going to have 1 for x plus 1, 1 for x minus 5, and then 1 for that numerator. But I'd like to put the like terms together so it's not so long. Good. 2x minus 3x would be negative x. Hey, that's weird. And then good, minus 13. Looks like a musical staff, sort of. So let's think about this one first, because that's kind of weird. If you set this equal to 0, here, I'll just write it off to the side. You don't have to if you don't want to, but just to watch. If you set that equal to 0, what would you do to both sides? You would add over the 13. This is like welcome back to algebra class. You'd get negative x equals 13. So x is negative 13. I think we can safely assume that's going to be the smallest one. All right, then what? Like, what's the next one? Negative 1 for this one. And then 5. So the first 2, The ones where nothing weird happened. They'll be negative until they get to their number and then turn positive. And then what do you think is going to happen with the last one? Like if you had to guess.
Oh, wait, no.
It's going to be positive and then turn negative. And you're right. And if you want to pick a test number, you can. But when it's backwards like that, like when you have the negative with the x, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be the other way around. And then you can draw your little balloon strings. And if you are ever not sure, like I've given you some shortcuts to how to plug in your positives and negatives, like to fill them in, just to save you some time and work. But if you don't like those suggestions I'm making, pick a test number. Pick a number smaller than -13, plug it in. Pick a number bigger than -13 and plug it in. You don't have to do like the kind of shortcut things I'm telling you if that makes you uncomfortable. Like pick something and test it. All right, what's your sign for the first section? You have negative, negative, positive. Okay, good. Negatives cancels, that'd be positive. Negative, 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 and this is going to alternate here. And then you have to pick which sections you want. So look back at the, like, well, I guess we can't look at the original. We have to look at our first step here. Once we got 0, we want the positive sections and brackets or parentheses. Parentheses, which is nice because then there's all going to be parentheses. So greater than 0, we want the positive sections, this one, and just all parentheses. So how would I write that? Good. Negative infinity to -13, union